Now, why flip your classroom? Why should we switch to an approach called the flipped learning approach? What would force us to do that? Let me state at the very beginning that we don't have to flip because people are asking to flip. We don't have to flip because others are flipping. We should have a very clear rationale why we mean to flip. And that should be a very logical kind of an explanation to provide to people when they ask you, why do you flip? Why do you go for a flip? Because if you think that the current approach which you are practicing is quite effective and it is delivering what it is supposed to deliver and it promises active learning in your classrooms, it promotes application-oriented practices in the classroom, and it delivers intended results in terms not only of the grades but in terms of applying what they have learned, and you are thoroughly satisfied with the outcome, then you don't have to flip. You have no reason to flip at all. But if not so, and if you think that after reading about the flip, understanding the concept of the flipped classroom, if you're convinced that the flipped classroom promises benefits which cannot be had otherwise, then you do have a reason to flip. Then you can go for that. What I mean is you should be thoroughly convinced regarding the reasons for going for the flipped classroom and the benefits which are inherent in that kind of an approach. See, the first reason why you should go for a flip obviously is that you need to look at the changes around in the world. Now, keep education apart. If you look at, for example, hospitality industry, tourism industry, or transportation industry, production industries of different kind, what do you find? All these industries have been positively impacted by the arrival of technology. There is so much change made possible by the integration of technology into our lives. Now, Uber taxi is one which gives you a classic example of what happens in that particular sector. Airbnb will tell you about what happened in that sector. So, when digital technology has so significantly turned around the possibilities and potential in other areas, we need to ask how has it contributed to the rediscovery of teaching learning process, either in the classroom or at home or in any other space for that matter. This is not to argue that just because technology has come, we need to upend all our practices. But if technology has to offer certain possibilities that would constructively contribute to increasing the real active learning possibilities in the classroom, then we need to grab it, make use of it. So, if there is so much of change going around, change for the better, change thanks to technology, there's no reason why we shouldn't accept those changes. And there's no reason why we shouldn't integrate the gains from those technologies into teaching learning practices too. We need to do that because that would help us improve the outcome of what we are trying to achieve. Secondly, the learners we are handling are millennials, right? They are all born into the age of Facebook, WhatsApp, Spotify, and all that. When they are born into technology and when they are the first fully connected generation you have, when they are always connected to the devices they carry, and when they have so much of access to information one way or the other, we need to exploit all those channels of information and connectedness so that our jobs would be made easier and more effective. And the flipped classroom is one way of doing it. And thirdly, there is an increasing demand for skilled workforce. All the teachers around the world at different levels are beginning to feel the pressure regarding the requirement of producing skilled graduates. And when you talk about production of skilled graduates, you know that it becomes necessary that your students are exposed to such a learning which makes skill development possible. And skill development becomes possible only if they go for hands-on kind of learning. They need to do their learning in a sense. They should be good at applying the concepts they have apparently understood. And when you talk about skill, we are not talking only about the hard skills, we are talking more about soft skills these days. And when you have a flipped classroom, which is more activity oriented, in which more active integration of their learning into practice happens, definitely it can promote lots of soft skills like teamwork, leadership skills, interpersonal skills, creativity skills, adaptation. Lots of those skills could be developed when you have a classroom which is a dynamic space in which active learning happens. The world is not only demanding skilled graduates from the teachers, the world is also demanding outcome-oriented education. End of the day, the grades only will not be sufficient. We are increasingly pressured into proving that we have delivered what we promised to deliver. And the evidence of what we have made possible should be evident on the part of the learner. And that is the learning outcome we are talking about. When there is so much of emphasis on learning outcome, we need to switch our methodology into one which promotes that kind of a learning, which promotes that the outcomes are guaranteed, which is yet another reason why we should go for a flipped classroom. And we also know that when technology makes its inroads, very serious, massive inroads into the world of education, the world definitely would ask, demanding from us increased personalization. Now, according to one report, a school in Spain, they employed a chatbot to interact with the learners. And within a period of time, a span of time, they have gathered around the chatbot, responded to around 39,000 plus queries, doubts coming from the school students. And according to the same report, 92% of accuracy was reported in the answers given by the chatbot. On the one hand, it talks about how the machine learning is encroaching into the teaching space, into our classrooms, and how it is beginning to do it successfully. On the other hand, when you have so much of data, this is a data-driven world, you know that. When you have so much of data from the learner community in the form of the questions they have asked, and in the shape of the doubts they have raised, and in the nature of the concerns they have aired, we are capable of gathering all these data and classifying the data in terms of where it has come from which learner it has come from, and which category of students have asked what kind of questions. So when we break down and categorize and arrange the data which has come our way, we are capable of more specialization and personalization. We will have so much of information regarding a particular learner and the kind of concerns, doubts, queries, apprehensions she or he has about the learning provided in that particular institution. And such data would be very useful when we reflect on what we are doing and when we try to improve what we have done so far. And the possibilities it gives us are endless. There is so much we can do with that. So when increased personalization becomes a key element of the teaching learning process, a methodology like the flipped classroom can definitely help us a lot. And this is one another reason why we have to take to the flipped classroom. And when you talk about other reasons in a more specific fashion, we also have to talk about various advantages like the deeper learning it makes possible. The recorded lecture which we have sent home to the learner is listened to, watched by the learner at his or her convenience. They can watch it again and again. They can watch it in different parts. They can watch it at their convenience. And they can come up with the way they have understood and their questions later. It makes possible deeper learning, and it will definitely generate more learner queries in the classroom. And it would also lead to authentic doubts and authentic questions on their part, and more authentic clearances would be necessary on the part of the teacher too. They would come up with discoveries of many kinds in the process. And another added advantage is that their problem solving skills will definitely improve a lot. Because once they come, after having listened to the lecture, we test them on what they have comprehended, and then we put them into application oriented questions which will check and test the limits of what they have learned and the capacity to apply to something else. Higher order thinking skills will be tested and challenged over there, which would naturally contribute to the problem solving skills of the learners. And this is not an isolated thing. That is, yes, another positive of the flipped classroom. This is team driven. They often find themselves working in small groups, occasionally in large groups. So a lot of spotlights on a lot of questions and answers from different students will fall on a question. When they are trying to solve a problem, they will have perspectives coming from different individuals in the team. That would contribute a lot, and that contributes to a sense of community, building a sense of community identity in them, and they learn how to work in the group too, which is very significant in the emerging world. And often the assessment which happens is in-time assessment, real-time assessment. You have a teacher moving around, a teacher who is not burdened by the responsibility of giving the lecture. The lecture time is actually taken off from the class time, and the whole class time is completely devoted to clearing the doubts and making discussion possible. So real-time assessment is made, and different kinds of inputs, creative suggestions, advices, corrections are done by the instructor, the teacher who moves around. This is definitely a big improvement on what we normally do in the traditional classrooms. And as I said earlier, more personalized learning also becomes possible over there, because we can spend more time with each learner. We can listen to each learner more, and we try to address the questions and doubts which come from each learner separately. So the learner autonomy becomes more of a reality in a flipped classroom. And when you consider all these positives falling into place in a flipped classroom, there is no wonder why it has triggered so much of interest, and why many of the members of the teaching fraternity are showing more interest in switching over to a flipped methodology. It's not easy to deliver, as you will find later. It has a lot of challenges built into it, but definitely we know that if you are capable of addressing those challenges, working hard on that, and triggering the passion which is inherent in the learner, making them interested in what they are doing, then obviously the flipped classroom can bring in huge positive changes in the teaching learning spaces. Now, these are some of the major gains, major takeaways from the flipped classroom. Thank you.